Okay, there we are. So I want to turn over the floor without delay to Jonathan Orlemans, who's joining us here, and Jesus Revolcaba, who's joining us on Zoom. We got a nice gathering here in person and a big group joining us on Zoom to talk about substitute teaching. I will share a document with a bunch of information with a really wonderful and almost exhaustive batch of information that Jonathan shared with me, I think almost a year and a half, 2 years ago, a while ago, and that has lots of really wonderful information. So I'll share that in the Zoom chat, and I'll also be sharing some other links that Jonathan and Jesus think are going to be useful. But for now, let's have Jonathan do a quick introduction, and then Jesus, if you want to also introduce yourself in a minute.
Jonathan Orlemans. I graduated here in 2019, BA in history. Started substituting pretty much right after that. Entered my teaching credential, kind of got delayed with it. Still working on an internship, which I actually had an orientation today to start a new job over fall. But I've been substituting for about 4 years now. I've been in like 5 districts. So I've experienced the process, interview process, things like that.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Jesus, do you want to say a quick hello?
Yeah, hi, my name is Jesus. I did my undergrad at UCR. I am still trying to finish my MA here at CSUSB. I've been subbing for a year within the same district, mainly because I've been working at this district ever since I graduated high school, actually. So it just made sense to stay within the same district. And yeah, just been substitute teaching has been very eye-opening over the last year since I've started. So very beneficial.
As a tantalizing start, eye-opening, because it's where are we going to go on that? Excellent. Thank you, Jesus. I want to ask if either of you want to give some preliminary introductory remarks, or if you'd just like to throw it open for questions right away. I'm going to share this document that I shared when we did our Future History Teachers program with Hannah and Alex Ponce a while back. Because at the bottom of this document is that wonderful collection of information that that Jonathan provided a while back. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the document, you're going to get that. Did Jonathan or Jesus, do you want to lead with anything to get everybody cooking here, or do you want to throw it right open? Jesus? All right. Well,
I'm fine with anything opening the
throw it
floor.
open. I would say, let me start things off. Can you substitute before you finish your BA, or is the BA the sort of hard start period when you can get into the classroom?
I believe you should be able to, if you have to meet a unit requirement. Usually it's at least in your junior year or your third year, you will meet that unit requirement. But if you double check the document, the information.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Jesus, you want to jump in?
to add to that, you are allowed to sub before your BA, but it is a limited amount that you could sub. In order to be considered a full-time sub, in which you could substitute as many days as you want, you have to have your BA, and then either your CBEST done, so pass English, and you have to show proficiency in English and math. Or if you don't want to do the CBEST, but if you're considering doing your teaching credential, you might as well do the CBEST. Having a B or higher in your basic college algebra and English composition as well, I believe.
Hey, I don't want to pull rank, but if nobody else jumps in, I am going to keep asking questions.
You have to meet subject matter competency. I work at the College of Education.
Subject matter competency.
That's what they call it. So, you have to, like, certain classes that either you pass CBEST or you pass that, and you get that like check from the College of Ed.
Right. Here's one of the links that Jonathan shared with me from the CTC, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. And then here's the other, so I'll put that, this is from EdJoin. We've seen this EdJoin link before when we talked about teaching. So Jackson, please jump in.
So for substitute teaching, you do need to do the CBEST first before you can start doing that, or no?
So you don't need it to start. You could just have, as I said, if you pass the English or math class. But if you are thinking about going into a teaching credential, you might as well do it. I know when I was started substituting, I actually, I had to wait an entire year for my application to go through because the district where I work at, they only have one person working through all that. And when I first applied with that first application, it was during COVID, and I still hadn't done the CBEST at all. Um, but once all the process was starting to get going, that's when I actually did the CBEST in order to, because I was suddenly thinking about teaching high school. So, but the initial process started with me just needing my college classes as the requirement.
Same process. I passed the CBEST first, and I didn't start substituting until after I started. So I don't know the process before that.
All right, and we have down at the bottom of this document, again, this one that I shared, and I see a whole bunch of people have already jumped onto that document. Here we are. A lot of really great information to get you started, just in terms of the basic requirements. So you're going to, you want to be on a sort of roster? Is that the kind of mechanics of the process?
So usually when you get picked up as a substitute, they'll put you in a substitute pool. It usually works on seniority, basically who's been there the longest, and you get calls or jobs will show up on an app, basically based on seniority. So that's how you.
Yep. Jesus?
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. There's an app called Frontline, at least that's what the district I work on and a majority of districts use, in which basically a teacher posts jobs there, you pick it up. There's also the calling mechanic in which you receive calls, in which I just ignore them. I just see the 800 number and ignore them because I prefer using the app. But yeah, but yeah, as it was said, what is it? It's based off of seniority. Subs who have been there the longest, they typically get first choice. But you could obviously, if you keep, depending on the school, if you keep working at a certain school, they might start favoring you even if you just started.
And also I'll mention that not every school district uses the Frontline app. Some of them use, San Bernardino uses it's Pearson. It's like a system that they made or something, but it's Pearson related. So every school might have a different system of how they call you. Some schools, smaller districts, they might only do phone. If it's two schools in a district, you are getting called. There's not really a way to avoid it.
And Chelsea said, Chelsea also noted a moment earlier, she said it's subject competency for credential. CBEST is general. I don't believe CSET is required if you're applying for a 30-day permit, so that's the short term.
It's kind of fun.
Okay, and Chelsea also joked here, so tired of the calls. So it sounds like, there are more positions than, it sounds like if you're on the list, if you get on that list, and if you're, how does that work? If you, I've heard this, and I'm not sure if this still applies, if you don't pick up the phone for a few days, do you get bumped down that list, or is it, is there anything along those lines that you're aware of, or no?
I've never personally noticed. It depends how big the pool is. If you have hundreds of subs in the district, the amount of calls you'll get are gonna dwindle based on how many people are in the pool. But if your district's really hurting, and they don't have a lot of subs that are coming in, you'll get calls every day. And then two, you can work for multiple districts. So if you're in multiple districts and you have maybe 20, 30 different schools to choose from, then you should be able to find work.
And Chelsea seems to be getting a lot of calls. Or is it a time of year? Is it a sort of state of affairs in 7-12 generally?
Sorry to jump in. For my district specifically, it's kind of a unique situation where I've worked for districts in the past where I was able to differentiate whether I wanted elementary or middle or high school. And my current district doesn't allow me to make that selection. So they give me calls for everything, including elementary, but I don't do elementary. So a lot of the calls I get are just elementary. And then like Jesus was saying, I accept most of my jobs online on Frontline directly. So the calls really don't do anything for me because if I want a job, I'm just gonna get on the app.
Well, with me, it's kind of a different situation because I'm a resident sub too at my district. And with me, the office manager literally has me set on Frontline already, like literally she puts me down as guest teacher, and then if I do end up getting a job, right, if I have to cover for a teacher, then that's when I'm gonna get the call from Frontline, and of course, when I get on there, it's like, it's gonna say the name of the teacher, and I accept it right there. So really, like it does depend on really how well the office manager knows you too. If you were there for a long time as a resident sub, it's like, you know, the office manager kind of.
Can we be clear about the resident sub and what else is going, sorry, Jesus.
I was gonna say resident subs are very different as to what just a regular sub. Resident subs, you just stay to that one school you are assigned to, in which the schools usually choose at the end of the school year or like within the first month of their summer break, who their resident sub's gonna be. Typically, it is the sub who covers there the most or has covered there the most, and they usually keep them there and they reuse them every single year. But sometimes I know during COVID they increased the number of resident subs in the schools, but since we're going back to normal times, those have decreased. And then with the calls also, for example, in the position I am right now, I am long-term subbing for someone. And even though I know I am booked the rest of the year, I am still getting those calls if I want the job, even though I know I'm gonna be busy the rest of the year. So that just shows how that's why at least I ignore the calls, because I know I have a job, what is it, for sure the rest of the year, and yet I am still getting these calls.
So for anybody that's wondering, you can go on the website and put it so you have a do not call time. And you can set your hours, but sometimes your personnel person might not like that.
Mhm.
It just depends if they warned you about it or not, but you can set hours to like, if you only want to take calls from 5 PM to 6 PM, you can do that. You don't want to take calls on Fridays, Saturdays, and you can do that too.
Sure.
Are any of you credentialed or Jordy, are you planning on getting one, or do you prefer on like becoming, just focusing on subbing, or?
I'm currently in my internship. I will start in fall. I had orientation today for it, so, but,
For a full-time teaching position?
yeah,
So you got the job?
yes.
Congratulations.
I'm working for them over summer. It's a private school, and then in fall, they said, if it works out good, then I'm ready to go for my internship.
Congratulations.
For a single subject or more?
A single subject.
Single subject, that's cool.
But I'd say too, what was your question again?
Like, are you credentialed, are you, do you have a single subject credential, or?
Yeah, so single subject history. I'd say if you are doing anything in education, you might want to look at multiple subjects because the requirements from K through 8, you're allowed to teach those now. And it used to be where middle school you had to be single subject. So
That's all.
Okay, so that multi-subject goes through 8.
Mhm.
Goes through 8, okay. Jackson, please jump in.
How many hours, like on average, do you guys work a week?
I mean, so I'm basically 5 days a week. If I'm on a long-term assignment, then I'm booked all the way through the week. It depends on my district, but the standard in my district is 7.19 hours technically, but realistically with like prep time and stuff like that, you're actually kind of working an 8-hour day.
So you said long-term sub, and Jesus mentioned this as well. So we have, you talked about a regular sub, you talked about a resident sub, and then you talked about long-term sub. So these are 3 different categories, right?
Yeah.
So is that a parental leave or?
Not all school districts offer residency. So some school districts will offer resident like Jesus said, usually the first couple months of school or maybe towards the end of the school year, they'll ask, hey, you've been here all year. Can you come in every day? And you show up to the same school site every day and they'll put you in whatever classroom they need you in for that day. That way they don't have to rely on the system to call and, you know, divide a class up if somebody doesn't show up or anything like that. A long-term sub position is when there is somebody on parental leave, or maybe they have an illness or some other kind of reason to be gone for at least, I think it's over technically 30 days, then you can do a long-term sub position.
Martin, you're in a long-term sub position right now.
Unless if you're subbing for something that you're credentialed in, then you can go longer, cause with me, since I have a BA in history and I had my credentials already, I actually was in a long-term position last school year.
And then there is also the CSET waiver for it too. So if you pass your CSET, I think you can bump it up to like 180 days or something.
Excellent. Excellent. And Chelsea said single subject is good for 7 and 8, dicey for 6, depending on whether it's in middle or elementary school. So depending on how the district divided it up, I've been told even at the middle school level, they're going to want multiple subjects for 6th grade. Okay, so that's multiple subject credentials as opposed to the single subject.
Single subject.
Great. All right, thanks. Jesus, were you gonna jump in there?
What is it with that, what is it, the single subject, it really, what is it, they typically, if they do need a long-term sub, they typically try to find someone who fits the mold. The situation I'm in, for example, I technically am not a long-term, even though I am a long-term. But because the subject I'm covering is geology, and since I obviously did no geology at all, the best they could do is make me like a roving sub, which is basically a resident sub, in which obviously I, what does it, come in and act like a long-term, in which I come in, I still grade the stuff for the kids, I still, you know, lesson plan a little bit, I plan out the week, how it's gonna go. But the big difference between both of those, also long-term and short-term, is pay rate, in which if you are a long-term, you are paid few more. At least in my district, a regular sub is paid $250 a day, and then long-term is $275 a day, in which it might not seem much, but then after an entire month, it is a lot. So if you have the possibility to do a long-term, very useful, very also you learn a lot by being in that position. You are basically a teacher at that point. So it's very useful to take those positions.
How, can you talk a little bit about the prep for a long-term sub or a resident sub or a regular normal sub position?
So for regular sub, it's at least in my opinion, it's very much you're babysitting the class, because a bunch of teachers do not trust their subs to teach the class.
Yeah.
So it's very much just babysitting, in which it gives you a lot of practice when it comes to class management, which is very beneficial. Also, if you're doing short term, you could, you know, Chelsea, she says she preferred high schools. I also prefer just subbing high schools. The reason why is because I've subbed elementary schools, and I know I do not get along with those kids. So I typically tend to, you know, sub for just high schools. But then once you go into a long term, right, you start, you know, getting included into the system. You get yeah, Chelsea, two very different worlds. With for example, one of the things I was very much lacking was the administrative part of teaching, in which I felt very confident when it came to my class management. I felt I can control kids, which is why they put me in the position where I am, because they needed someone who can manage a class. But I didn't know the process behind, for example, writing referrals, or how Aries work, which is their grading system and their attendance system. So through positions of doing this long term, I have learned all this stuff, in which I feel confident that if by chance a position opens for history or some sort of social science within the district, I feel very adequate that I could take the position even under emergency credentials and do a good job at it.
Yeah, very much two different worlds. Elementary, I'd say the teachers expect a lot more if you're subbing elementary. They expect you to actually do the work with the class, get up in front of the class, read books, things like that. And then you do have to know, up until at least, sixth grade especially, you do have to have basic knowledge of all the subjects. I mean, it's umbrella matter, you're having to cover everything. And so middle school it's rough.
They're rotted out people.
We're not gonna stand it.
But the teachers do, I think, at least in the districts I'm in, they do expect you to do a little bit more than in high school. High school is very much just babysitting, making sure nobody's, throwing stuff in class, basically. Yeah, starting fights, things like that. Unless you get to know a teacher, and they write up a lesson plan for you, especially with high school, then that's when you are like, okay, yeah, I actually have to get up and teach and do stuff. But otherwise, it's usually just packet work and stuff like that. Or Chromebooks, yeah.
Yeah, that's how I am at the high school I work at, because the high school where I work at is the high school I graduated from. So the teachers know me, and since they knew I was getting into it, especially one teacher who teaches AP European or world history, I mean. So every single time he's out, he always calls me and says, here, like, this is what the lesson plan is. Since I want you to get practice for lesson planning, I'll give you the outskirts, but you teach the class however you want to, but just make sure this topic gets covered. And that's where I, really enjoy the position as subbing. But then when I'm just babysitting, let's say a med core class, I'm like, well, what do I do here?
Can I ask about thriving in the work of a substitute? Because I between Chelsea and Martin, Jesus and Jonathan, I think we've got a lot of experience in terms of this kind of work. So thriving, and then on the other side, maybe having difficulty, having a lot of trouble or difficulty or frustration in this kind of work. So this theme that we explore in this series of careers for history majors, any kind of work for history majors, we think about what I wish I had known. So along that sort of a theme, Jonathan, Jesus, and Martin, anybody wants to weigh in terms of things that are going to really help you thrive in this work, or things that are maybe going to be a bad decision and are going to get you into either overstretched or exhausted or frustrated within the work. Anything will jump to mind along those lines?
So major one I would say is, like, if you have a calendar app, sync a calendar app to your frontline app. If you're taking jobs in multiple districts and they might not all use the same system, you want to write it down. Otherwise, you're going to accept 2 different jobs in 2 different districts. One's going to call you angry that you didn't show up because you went to one place but didn't show up to the other. So
Organization.
Important.
Excellent. Jesus?
I would say the 2 big things is, one, being available, because if you are available a lot, they will keep calling you. I know at the beginning of the year at the high school where I'm at, I was still floating around, but the subsecretary, the one in charge of, putting out the jobs, she noticed that I was constantly taking jobs and I was not missing that many days. And that's how I ended up in the position I'm at right now. Another thing is, know your worth. Because I know for a fact in the position I am, and I've talked to a lot of the teachers there, I know I am being underpaid for what I am doing. But I recognize, these kids need stability. So one, I want to, provide that, in which they don't have like a different teacher every single other week. And 2, I set my limits, because obviously if they were paying me the full amount for long term, I would lesson plan. I would learn the curriculum to an extra level than what I already know. But since I am not getting paid that amount, I set my boundaries, in which I set them, in which I am willing to grade the stuff for the kids, since that's not as difficult. But then when it comes to lesson planning and actually teaching, like making lessons and stuff like that, that's where I draw the line, in which if I do if they do want me to do that, then they better, actually consider me a long-term position in the long-term position.
That sounds like striking a balance, because being available to maximize the amount of work that you want to do, but then also on the other side, knowing your worth and knowing when to put those boundaries into place. That sounds really good, especially, I'm sure when you all, because I know you all so well, do a terrific job in your work. There may be, I'm sure, banging on your door and ringing your phone off the hook to get you back in. Martin, and Chelsea, if you have any thoughts. Martin, did you have anything jump to mind? Thriving in the work of a sub as opposed to anything, have you seen others maybe stumble in the work of a sub or maybe become overstretched or anything like that?
Really, it's just, what I do have to say is just know the environment that you're in, really, get to know the district that you're working for, get to know, of course, the demographics of the school district in general, and especially with new subs that do come to my district, right? If it's literally their first day, right? Because we do get subs, it's like, oh, it's their first day, right? The office manager tells us, it's their first day, and right, okay, well, we help them out with setting up the classroom, getting to, the system, how to do areas, right? And it's really just informing them of what to do. Hey, if this comes up, you can dial this number, right? And, just the whole point is just making sure they know that, you're in charge.
And honestly, the school that Martin works at, he needs a presidential medal at the end of the year. Every year he needs to get a medal. So I live in the same city and it's it's a very challenging job and it's really, saints, honestly, put up with these kids.
I think just practically too, as a per diem, if you're long term, that's different, but as a per diem sub, it's sort of inconsistent work sometimes because there's sort of ebbs and flows in the year. There are times, like especially around vacation periods or like certain times of the year when teachers won't be taking the days off so much, and then there will be like times where they'll have tons of jobs because they need, teachers are being pulled out for AP testing or for training or whatever's going on. So in terms of, making a consistent, steady living, it's been great for me as a grad student because I can have the flexibility of schedule and taking jobs when I'm able to. But you have to be realistic about like what kind of money you need every month because, for example, my district does not offer summer work. Summer is given, the priority is given to main teachers, full-time teachers to take summer work. So there's really basically no work during the summer months for 2 months, 2 or 3 months as a per diem substitute teacher. So there's a lot of things like that you need to take into consideration. But I think for most of us, the goal is to get in to become that salaried full-time teacher. So it's really great for that, like Jesus was saying earlier, to get your feet, to dip your toes, to get your foot in the door and to really experience what it's like before you become a full-time teacher.
I do think once you get credentialed, of course, I even considered doing, substituting, and I almost got a substituting job too, but I do feel like someone like which is great, but I feel like getting your credential, you can maximize the amount of money you can make like crazy because, a lot of schools are really hurting for teachers, and I send out a lot of emails to our students at the College of Ed where like they're offering sign-in bonuses like nurses now because there's such a shortage. So I also would recommend to get your credential, multi-subject or single subject credential, because you can make so much more money.
It's definitely more beneficial. I give the example of my godfather. His first year teaching, he made twice as much as what I do in a year as a sub, which is a lot. But then again, for example, in my position, I was not planning about teaching high school. I was thinking about going straight into a PhD, trying to teach college. That's all I was thinking. I wasn't teaching anything related to high school. But as last year was progressing and I started subbing and I started working with more and more high school kids instead of the bunch of high school kids I was working with before, I actually started realizing, you know what, I actually really enjoy teaching high school. I really enjoy, providing, an outlet for these kids. one, talk to me, or to, you know, teach them something that they wouldn't be typically taught, because I am bringing fresh ideas that are, you know, very recent in the college or the collegiate level, which they wouldn't get from their other teachers because they have been already teaching for 10 plus years. So it was very, for me, it was a very rapid change in which I'm barely going to start doing my credentials. But as I said, if you subbing's a very good, as Chelsea said, very good way to, you know, start getting, or at least trying to figure out whether you want to do it. And if you do want to do it, what role do you want to do it? Do you want to do it in elementary school, middle school, or high school?
Say too, it's one of the few jobs that you can really plan your own schedule, day by day. There's half days, things like that. So it's one of the things that you can actually plan your day around. If you have a lot of other things that you're focusing on too. If you have classes, you know, they're all on Mondays and Wednesdays or something, you know, that Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays are open to you, then you can plan around that. Financially, if you become a substitute, I would say if you're worried about saving for summer, because you plan basically not to work on in summer, schools first, they offer summer savers, so they take a portion of your paycheck every month and they put it into that. It has it's like 7% interest on it, so it ends up kind of being able to carry you over that summer line without having to worry.
Summer savers.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I've never heard of that. So that's a program where a portion of your pay for substituting during the regular academic year is going to be set aside and then
Right.
it's going to be distributed over your summer.
I've heard some districts do it themselves, but the Schools First Federal Credit Union, I know that they.
We have that here too, staff, we have that, I have it for staff even,
Yeah,
so even if you work in the, you're gonna get it.
Yeah, it's technically the same for full-time teachers, salaried teachers too. They're only salaried for 10 months, but most split it over 12. So
Yeah, I know my district, they have their own program within the district itself that provides that, in which if you want to send some of your money for the summer months, and you can save it.
I'm going to share one example of it, and Jonathan said this is the organization you do this through.
Yeah.
Okay, because this is new to me, so I'm still figuring things out, but.
And also like another benefit of subbing, I feel like, because a lot of our students, like, so if you want to get your credential, you have to either be a student teacher or intern. So if you're already a sub in the school, they'll sometimes, because when you student teacher, you don't get paid. It's basically like free work, basically, you don't get paid at all. But if you're already a sub in the school, a lot of the schools will offer you an internship where you can be a student teacher, but you'll get paid for it as an intern, and and not only you're getting paid, but you're also working towards finishing your credentials, which takes 2 semesters. So that's another way, like the sub teaching does like put your foot in the door and shows your face to a lot of the people that are gonna be your future employer later on, so.
And it's also a good way to get references for when you finally meet that step. If you have a lot of teachers who've relied on you, I mean, letters of recommendation, things like that. It becomes a lot more easier when you have your foot in the door.
Getting your foot in the door, getting your name on that list, is that a cold call to a school district, an email with your resume, CV attached? What is sorry, we're going backwards I should have asked this at 5:30, but the first step, getting your name on that list.
If you if right now you're in graduate or you're undergraduate, I would say apply for maybe like Abbott first. It's a good way to get in, and then as you're going through that, apply for sub positions maybe afterwards, but edjoin.org is mainly where all California schools, I mean, across the US, that's mostly where all those jobs are posted. If you already work at the school, whether it's like proctoring for elementary or security or something like that, they like to see that their employees are trying to kind of level up in a way. And kind of gain new experience doing something else. I see a lot of teachers' aides who end up becoming substitute teachers, which is a natural progression with their degree, so.
Getting those, sorry. Chelsea, please go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry. Just wanted to say that yeah, the applications are usually through EdJoin for any education job, at least in the state of California. But if you're interested in becoming a sub, those jobs, some districts have it open year round, but if they have more or less of a demand, they'll open up sort of like February, March, April, and towards the end of the year. So they're open now. Sometimes they close at the beginning of the year, but don't let that discourage you. It'll open up towards the end of the year for the next year.
Yeah, right now it's peak time period for schools, districts to hire people because they're trying to set their right now is when they start creating their schedules, how who's gonna teach what, and sometimes they're looking for positions to fill up. Like right now, I check EdJoin every single day just in case there's a social science department opening at anywhere in the district. So literally, it's you should be checking it every single day to see what's available.
I'll also say you could put an application in today and you might not get a call for a year.
Mhm.
It just depends on when they actually need substitutes.
You could also just call the district and annoy them because that's what I did. As I said, the lady who God bless her because she has to process everything when it comes to subs. But I submitted 4 applications in which the first one I submitted was the one that got through, in which that was a year before I got hired. So it takes a while for them to process everything. Even if it's like a quick district, it's gonna take at least like a couple months because you have to get fingerprinted, in which that's an entire month process.
Oh, sorry, flag that for a second. That's live scan, is that correct?
I
Or-
do believe so. It's at least that here, what is it? The district itself does it. I'm not sure how they do it, but yeah, it's either way, you have to get, fingerprints done, you gotta get your TV test done, there's a whole process when it comes to hiring. So it's something that, if you have as I was that avid tutor, right? Be doing having your way in already within the district before as a sub, very helpful to transition because everything's already in there. So you just go in like that.
So the live scan, most of the school districts give you the form and then you just have to go to a live scan location. And then once you get your CTC clearance through, I think it's your DOJ fingerprinting, you don't ever have to do it again.
Okay,
You shouldn't, at least, unless the school special requests it. But your FBI, you will have to do for every new job.
okay. And I am gonna share this document. And I scrolled down to the bottom of it, to the notes that Jonathan sent ahead. Again, this is from a little while ago, but you've reviewed them and they are more or less current. But I'll scroll through them here just so that everybody can see it. So I'm sharing screen so everybody in Zoom land can see this. But I've added the CTC guidelines, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing Guidelines here. That's a link in that document. And here Jonathan has given some really straightforward notes on how you're gonna go through this, including the live scan. So please go ahead and take a look at this 2 to 3 letters of recommendation we talked about. Is there a point where you need to have your resume, your CV in shape?
It's always good to have one.
Mhm.
It'll depend on the district if they actually require it or not.
Okay. All right, and so go ahead and scroll through here, and Jonathan gave some other notes here also about SDAIE. And ELD that may be useful, second language, English language learners. And of course, EdJoin linked there. So please go ahead and click through that last link that I shared in the chat, and you'll see a lot more information, including some useful links. What is the title of the person that Jesus, you mentioned bugging somebody? What is the title of the person that you would look for on a school's roster?
Certificated personnel.
I'm gonna look it up.
I think it'd be certificated personnel services or something.
Yeah,
Service.
that sounds right, but mine is also just like HR or like the sub manager.
HR,
Yeah, it's within HR.
HR sub manager, office manager. Okay, great. So that's the person who's, if you want to get in the classroom as soon as possible, you go ahead and
And it's usually, most times it's usually the principal secretary
the principal
in
secretary.
my district, the office manager.
The principal secretary is usually the one who's like the site leader, so they're the ones who are managing when you show up at the school. But in terms of like the job distribution and the back end system, that's all through the district. So that would be the certificated or the HR people. So
Yeah,
the principal secretary is not necessarily involved in doing any of the hiring.
Oh, yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
it's
Oh,
a
yeah, okay, yeah.
With the site management.
at least in the district I work at, the lady in charge of hiring all the subs is a personal specialist in which she focuses on subs. But as I said, within the school I work at, you have a the curriculum secretary, I think, is in charge of it, in which she's in charge of putting jobs out whenever a teacher requests them, and then she's also in charge of other stuff like running AP tasks, SATs, and stuff like that. So it varies from school to school who's in charge of putting out jobs. Even those teachers themselves put the jobs out, but they have to, let the curriculum secretary know, hey, I'm gonna be out. These are gonna be my lesson plans. Can you print them out for the sub when they come in the morning?
Thanks. This is, I think this is really, really great.
Also, can I add with the CTC? You have to renew that every single year. It's a $100 fee every single year, in which it's not much considering how much you should be working. But yeah, every single year it should be renewed. And it happens every single year on the same day. So mine's is at the end of March. It is always the same day. So
I would say set a reminder, because if that expires, you cannot work. Or you're not supposed to, at least.
What is that? The CTC? What does that mean?
It's just your CTC credentials, so you could either
California
get.
teaching credentials.
Oh.
California teaching. It's really the website for educators, right? And literally you can search up any educator on that website to see, their credentials, right? Oh, they got their credentials on this.
If it's
year,
current,
That's current.
Also mandated reporting training.
Yes.
Yeah, so anytime you renew your sub permit, you have to also do, I mean, technically you're supposed to do it even if you have your credential, you're supposed to do mandated reporter training every year, which is like a series of videos and questions on the legalities of things that you're supposed to keep an eye out for in terms of things like sexual assault or other things that
that's
you're
usually
supposed to.
done at the beginning of the school year.
Yeah, right.
And you all awesome people, and I know you, but and quite cheerful people. And so I haven't heard any sort of like things to avoid. Have you seen let me make it not about you all, but have you seen a sub crash and burn in another room?
Yes.
And can you tell us a sort of what does that look like? So.
So I would say at the end of the day, remember, these are kids. They're gonna say some very wild and crazy things. Like, understand at the end of the day, if you're per diem, you don't have to deal with them again. You don't have to go back to that same class. Just recognize that these are children that you're working with, and especially in the middle school kind of age, like, you just have to recognize, like, they're gonna say stuff that are they're trying to get under your skin. Don't let it bug you.
Is there a
my
mantra?
advice.
Is there per diem?
Yeah.
I've gone.
If it's high school or middle school, hopefully they're on a period bell system, and you're like, okay, you're out of here in an hour and I don't have to talk to you again today.
Yeah, that's how it was for me. I know I had a personal experience that really made me, at the end of the day, I was actually thinking like, wow, I don't want to teach anymore. Like, I genuinely don't want to do this anymore. And shockingly enough, it was high school, and it was the credit recovery. They needed someone to cover them for the day. So I was like, I guess I'll take it. I already knew I wasn't gonna like it, and it was perfectly fine the first 3 class periods. But then something clicked in the 4th period, and that's when had water bottles being thrown across the class, pencils in the roof, people who weren't in the class just coming in, and they were saying, "Oh, this teacher sent us over here." I'm like, "Well, get out of here! Like, you're not supposed to be here." And they just wouldn't listen, and I'm like, "Well, I can't do anything because I can't, call 30 kids on security. Like I can't do that. Um, but yeah, as it's you change every single day. Like if you recognize that you don't like that class or you don't like that school in general, you could just say, you know what, I don't want to ever want to work there again, and you don't pick up any more jobs over there. And then eventually you'll find a school and you find some certain teachers that you're like, yes, I enjoy, working here. I enjoy covering your class because you have a structure in place already that makes my job easier. And you just keep trying to, find those jobs.
Honestly,
Yeah, I have
it's really just, it's picking and choosing your battles. That's what they always say, you know what, you just gotta pick and choose your battles. If it's something minor, it's like, you know what, just don't worry about it too much, right? But if it's something major, like a fight or something, or, it's just like the language of a kid is just getting too vulgar, like out of hand, right, mistreating, the other kids, it's like, okay, you know what, no, you're out, right? So, I mean, really, you're gonna have those classes where like all of the periods are fine, but there's gonna be that one period. There's always that one period, that's the problem. It's like, oh, God, especially if you go back to that, if you go back to something in that class, it's like, oh, man, this period again, try to get there.
The schools that I go to too, I talk to my office manager, I talk to the principals and stuff. Assistant principals, and they don't want to see that a substitute is struggling so much. If you're sending security over every 10-15 minutes to deal with something, they really don't like that. If it's something big like a fight or something major like that, that's okay. But if you're sending every kid up with a referral, you're just making a lot of nonsense work for the office. So if it's small, just deal with it in the classroom.
I was lucky enough that years ago on my very, 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 very first day of subbing, I had a middle school girl attempt to jump another girl in my classroom right in front of me. So I had to break up a fight, which is like it's insane, but with no training, it's like what is going on? But that was the only time that that's ever happened, and I've been subbing for many years now, off and on. But I think over time you kind of just like everybody's been saying about picking and choosing, you learn to laugh off most things unless it's something really serious. And then like Jesus was saying, you start to recognize which teachers have like systems in place that keep the kids, either on task or on some sort of like repercussion system, or they have expectations in place for their students. And so when you start recognizing who those teachers are and aren't, you sort of make a mental list of classes that you're going to go back to, or people that you're going to keep, going back to, or ones that you're going to avoid. And I mean, since then, my average day is actually, I tend to stick to high school because they're a little bit calmer. It's better developmentally with the younger ones to have the relationship form, so it's hard as a sub to come in when you're a stranger. But with the high schoolers, most days, maybe you'll have some talkative kids or whatever, but that's really the worst that it gets.
And then also through subbing, I would say one of the things you realize is what works best for each kid. So like in middle school, for example, it works best that if you are stricter with them, if you give them a structure, say, hey, these are the rules. If you break them, you are in trouble, and that they'll completely understand it. But if you do that with a high school kid, they're gonna try to fight back. They're gonna say, hey, you don't tell me what to do. So it's high school. The reason why I prefer high school is because I can be laid back with them, and they'll be laid back with me too. They'll treat me with more respect. And when I do tell them, hey, are you actually gonna do the work? And be like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll try it, just because you're not actually hounding me about it.
My brother teaches, I think, 7th grade, and he said that, are you gonna do the work? The response he gets from students is, yeah, I got you. I got you, Mr. Murray, here's your work, I got it. That's all, it's always like that, it's sort of.
Yeah, right, the high school, it's like, even if you were subbing there for a long time, right, cause there are subs that's been there for like 5 years or something, and students get to know you. If they see you every day, especially for resident subs, right? It's like, if they see you every day on that site, whether it's in different classrooms, probably even in the library or in the office, right? They get to know you, right? They get to know how you even work as well, especially if you're the sub that lays out the ground rules first, like in the beginning of the class period, right? You know, and yeah, with me, with high school, if they're chill with me, right, if once I tell them, hey, guys, this is the plan that your teacher left out for today, right? Do your work, you know, I do my work because of I get the kind of rating, like,
Have any of you ever been in a long-term sub position for 2 or 3 months and then gotten sick and had somebody else come into your classroom?
well, thank God, no.
John, you have had that?
Not 3 or so months, but a longer term position that went on, I think like 4 or 5 weeks. And I ended up not being able to make it one day and they just had a sub come in.
And how did that work for you going out of the classroom and then coming back in? Did you get a sense? So from the instructor's perspective, having a sub come into your classroom for a day and then coming back the day after, is there did that give you perspective on that work?
I mean, it was pretty relaxed still. I mean, it didn't change much. I was only out for maybe 2 days. But I've also covered classes where a substitute was in the classroom for almost 100 days. And I went in there for 2 weeks. And I mean, the students were very disrespectful in 2 of the periods, throwing stuff across the room, things like that. And they didn't finally relax with me till the end of the week. And then that's when the other substitute came back in.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
would
was it-
say with me, I know the position I came in, I already knew the teacher who was being fired at that point. I knew how she worked and I knew she was very laid back. You know, I walked in there and I was talking with the kids. I was like, so are you gonna do the work? And he's like, how many months are we into the school year? 5 months? I think the last time I did work was 5 months ago. And I was like, what's your grade in here? Oh, I have an A. And I was like, oh, okay. So had to very quickly, you know, set rules like, hey, if you don't turn in your work at this point, it is a 0, and they actually started doing work. I know when I was out for I think 3 days, I appreciate what is it? I got an appreciation as to why teachers, you know, do not trust subs with, you know, work and stuff like that. Uh, and the reason why is because the kids had an exam to do, and it was supposed to be easy, right? And you know, I thought, you know what, they know. I already told them, you know, the 2 weeks prior, it's like, hey, you're gonna have an exam on this day. Everything's on Google Classroom. Like you have no excuse. When I came back from break and started grading their stuff, I saw one class, for example, had that's like 25 kids. Only like 6 of them did the exam. And I was like, why did you guys not do the exam? And they're like, oh, the sub just sat there. He didn't tell us anything, or they didn't tell us anything. And I was like, okay, now I get why teachers act the way they do with subs, because it's very much what I just got right now. So yeah, that's another thing I learned from this, you know, long-term position. It's what is it? You start gaining more appreciation for the actual teachers, and why they do what they do.
I think it's hard to, as a per diem sub, long term you're developing those relationships. But as a per diem sub, when you enter the classroom, there's sort of, you know, the kids aren't necessarily disrespectful, but they know that you don't have necessarily the same resources that the teacher does to enforce a lot of the regular full-time, you know, things that they do in that classroom. And so like my least favorite thing is to get a test from a teacher, to proctor a test for students, because it's like, there are things that I don't know about the class in order to reliably, you know, proctor it. And so you get a lot of excuses from kids. So you'll say like, did you do this? And they'll say, yeah, I already did it. And you know, it makes it harder now because you have a lot of digital things. So if it's on Google Classroom, you don't necessarily have access to that. They may have copied from a friend. There's just a lot of things that go on as a sub entering a new space that are really hard to keep on top of if you don't have the relationship built with the kids. And so I feel like most teachers recognize that, and most of my days are like they'll just have some kind of independent work or studying for the test tomorrow or something like that. But it is kind of a difficult situation. Some subs are, you know, lazy, but it's not always a component of laziness necessarily so much as like it's just really difficult to keep kids on task and doing the right thing if you don't have all the tools in place that a normal teacher does.
I mean, it's been like a lot of my coworkers, right, the ones that's been subbing longer. Funny thing that they told me was like, one of them was like, you know which classes I like the most? Is when the teachers give out a paper assignment and they say specifically it's due by the end of the period, and that's their grade. And so, I actually grown to like more of like those teachers, right? That they have the assignments right there on their desk and they write there on the notes, oh, this is to be due by the end of the period. And I do let them know, I say, hey, guys, this is due by the end of the period, right? And usually with me, every time a kid would bring it up and I would say, all right, guys, I got some of you guys bringing it up here already. And then at that point, more and more kids start bringing it up there, in which majority of the periods they do their work actually. So it's like better than online.
I would say like, in terms of what Jesus was saying is, at the very least, write the assignment on the board, write your name on the board, introduce yourself first 5 minutes of class. And then if it's busy work, okay, for the rest of the class, you're basically just sitting there. But if you're having to like administer tests and things like that, I'd say 9th and 10th grade are more, if you're substituting 9th and 10th grade, they're more willing to get the work done. Senioritis is like a real thing.
I showed up honestly that last year. I just vibed the entire year, honestly. I barely did any work. It is very real. You're completely right.
So, I mean, yeah, I don't mind getting assigned a test to give students, if it's like 9th or 10th, maybe even junior, but like seniors, they're not. There's no way to convince them to do it.
Yeah, senioritis is very real. I'm having that issue right now with seniors in which they're like, I don't care. I don't want to be here. I should have been gone since August. And I'm like, you started the school year in August. I know I should have been gone in August. And yeah, it's an issue. And I agree with that. And it goes back to, as Chelsea said, you just getting work due at the end of the class period. It goes down to your day is basically down to how much of a structure that teacher has in their classroom. If a teacher has really good structure in their classroom in which they have their expectations set forth, they tell the kids, hey, whenever I'm out, for example, you're going to have an assignment and that assignment's going to be worth 3 times as many points as what you usually are. Or sometimes they say, hey, that assignment's going to be extra credit, and usually kids go crazy for extra credit, so they actually do it. Having those types of structures makes your day easier compared to, someone who's just there. It's like, hey, if they do it, they do it. If they don't, oh well. In which that also makes it difficult. And as that, like when you walk in there, right, as a sub, you should be writing your name up there so the kids know what to call you. You should be writing down the work on the board so they know, or it's at least shown that they knew that they had that work to do. So if they don't do it, that is their responsibilities. And typically what I like doing is, just walking around the classroom, making sure, hey, like if the kids are talking, maybe have a little conversation with them. It's like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool and all that, but can you actually, even just attempt to do the work? Like, I'm not expecting you to do it, but if you attempt to do the work, like, I would appreciate it. And since you're trying to build that rapport with them by talking with them a little bit before, they'll be more open to working on the assignment rather than if you just said, hey, do your work.
I'd say also something that high school students love is a free answer. So basically get up in front, tell them, hey, I'm gonna do 1 through like 3 with you, but the rest you guys gotta do on your own. And for whatever reason, it just tricks their brain to like actually start the assignment.
That's a good tip.
Yeah, in a math class, social science too, like they do not want to write definitions all day, and that's usually what it is. And so go through 2 of them, explain them really quick, and then they'll at least more than half of the class will end up doing it.
That's a good tip. That's a really great idea.
So
I asked a little bit about sort of horror stories and things that when things go sideways, but I also want to sort of move toward wrapping up and hear some of the best aspects of the work that you've been doing and what the real, how to really thrive and do, really well in this kind of work, and what some of the best pros are in your experience, the benefits of this kind of work.
you really get to be like a polymath, each day. If you're doing per diem work, to be an English teacher one day, math teacher the next day, history. There's CTE classes. I've been in culinary classes where I've gotten to eat food where they've had baking competitions the days that I showed up. So, I mean, yeah, it is fulfilling. If I could substitute and it was financially viable for a long-term career, I would do that. But it is fulfilling work when you get to know the students and things like that, so.
I would say I would agree that getting to know the students. I know since I work at the high school I work at, I'm always there. I start making really good relationships with those kids, and even if I'm not covering their class, if they see me in the hallways, they say what's up. They say, hey, how's it going? They update me on what they're doing on their classes. I know I had students what is it this year, whenever they see me, because I helped them so much when with AP European history for their AP test. Every single time they see me, they're like, "Oh my goodness, hi, how's it going? Like, I'm doing this class and I'm actually doing really good, and I'm also really stressed with this." And you start having a really good relationship in which some of those days, you might be having a bad day, but then when those kids come in and say, "Oh, thank you for helping me," and stuff like that, it really makes your day. It makes you really appreciate what you're doing.
I would definitely agree with that. Just like when they start asking you questions and you kind of get to feel like a real teacher for a little bit, that's a really good feeling. And then just to volley off of what he said earlier, in terms of like being able to see a variety of classrooms and teach a variety of things, but also like what I've really been enjoying is I've been able to see in my district they've really given a lot of teachers a lot of leeway to create their own programs and run with them, and so it's been really interesting to see the creative things and the programs that these teachers are establishing, and then I sort of like make notes on their ideas and the things that they're using in the classroom, and sort of get to build my own portfolio of ideas that I can take with me as a full-time teacher when I start applying, to start saying like, well, I've seen this implemented over here and I'd really like to help do it at your district too, stuff like that. So
And even like in our teacher supervisors that like supervise student teaching, I always hear them tell the student teachers, take pictures of what you like you're seeing, just take pictures of it, so you can apply that in your classroom once you become a teacher yourself, so I feel like that's,
And really the good thing is, when it comes, it's just great when you there every day and the students get to know who you are, right? If you have something in connection with them, right? If you like certain things as them, you get to talk a lot with them about, oh, did you see this episode about it? What did you see about it? What do you think about this? Right? Especially if you were like a long-term sub, right? Then they literally know you right away. Cause I know when I had my ex-students, every time I would pass by them in the hallway or outside, I'd be like, hey, Mr. Perez, how you doing? Or like, what's up? Or I have a student that says, what's up, P Dizzle? It's like, you get to know the different types of characters around the school, and they tell you how they're doing and what they're feeling like, or if they tell you, I like your class a lot better last year. It's like, it's a really good feeling. In the end, comes with great reward.
As Chelsea put in the chat, when you walk in and you hear the kids say yes, like in my favorite sub, that makes it, it makes you, it's like, oh, I'm gonna have a good day because they're actually excited to see me.
It's interesting when there's a student that you might have not had in almost a year, and then they remember you just because the one time you were in their class too. It's
That's really cool. I want to let our guests go. I want to thank everybody for joining us. If anybody has any concluding thoughts, we can wrap up with that. But I also want to remind everybody, I will share, if you got this announcement about this event, I'll share some links as well that Jonathan and Jesus and others have shared with me. But this has been, please join me in thanking Jonathan and Jesus, and thanks Martin and Chelsea. This has been, it's always a really nice opportunity to connect with you, Jonathan, and Jesus, for making the time to join us as well. This has been, yeah, I've learned a lot. Are there any last parting thoughts? Yeah.
I didn't get to touch on this, but if you do go into this and try to get into a couple districts, going off what Chelsea and Jesus were saying earlier, is if you're in a couple districts, you can avoid those classrooms that you've taken that you don't like. Because then it just gives you more space to work.
That's a concrete bit of advice.
Yeah, there may also not be jobs one day in one district, but jobs in another. So it'll give you a lot more consistency if you have multiple districts under your belt in terms of daily work availability.
That's excellent. Thanks, Chelsea. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jesus. I'll follow up with you, Jesus. We'll be in touch. Thank you all so much for joining us. I really enjoyed this.